Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Unfinished Business. I know we weren't on for Twisted Tuesday as we usually are, but we're going to be on IG Live now for Twisted Tuesdays because starting today until week one of the NFL season, we're going to be doing Fantasy Fridays.
Oh, I am excited.
And if the Borat Sambor will cooperate with us, great success. High five. Very pumped, very excited. The fantasy is my passion, fantasy football, because I just own everybody at it, and there's no second place. If I can quote the illustrious Ricky Bobby, if you're not first, you're last.
It's fun when
But
you
in my
play for
case,
no
if you're not
money,
in the
eh?
semifinals, you're last. In my
It's
case,
fun. It's fun when you play for no money.
it
Last
is
year, definitely, it's not. It was
honors
sarcasm.
code.
Last year was my first year where I didn't make the finals in 4 years, and that's because we played for no money and
Okay.
everyone didn't care. Two or three of the
So
teams were auto
which
drafted.
would mean
Auto
that you would be
drafted.
doing good in the league? No, shouldn't
No,
that what it
because the
mean?
best players got taken. Christian McCaffrey was auto drafted. You realize that, like
In the first
third
round,
overall, like third overall.
still, it was in the first round. It wasn't like it was in the third or fourth.
It's not like you didn't know who was that person could have taken someone else though.
I
You have
took
no
Mike
idea.
Thomas with
No
my
one,
first pick,
no,
and he
no
had
one
the
could predict it.
receptions record.
Fucking, I don't know. Let's see. Let's just get into this.
What was your
Let's.
record last year if you're so animate, huh?
I don't even know. I can't even remember
Brutal.
because I
Last
didn't
place.
care. Because I
Last
didn't care.
place.
No, I wasn't last. I know I
Yes, you
wasn't
were.
last. No, I
You
wasn't.
were dead last. You and
But
Bradburn were
the
tied.
but years before, first place finals, second place finals, fourth place finals.
That will
But
change this
I'd made the finals every
again.
single year.
But we're gonna go division by division, so 8 weeks, so 8 divisions until we reach week one of the NFL season. Hopefully, we start on time. Hopefully, we'll have a fantasy football season. So, without further ado, we start with our first division for Fantasy Friday. It's the NFC South with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who seem to be turning a lot of heads for this season with all the off-season acquisitions they've made. So, we might as well start off with quarterback with the GOAT, Tom Brady. So his 2019 season stats for everyone listening on is he's got just over 4,000 yards to his name, 24 touchdowns, and 8 INTs. He has finished 12th or worse in fantasy quarterback rankings in his illustrious career, but he could flourish this year with Bruce Arians being his head coach with a pass-heavy offense, and obviously we're going to get into how much weapons he has at his disposal. So key games to watch for me that you shouldn't start him for, but obviously we're going to have that bring on as soon as quicker games come closer. Obviously, he's going to play the Saints twice. I think they're going to struggle against
Yeah.
Chicago because I think that Bears defense is going to come back and be what they were 2 years ago. They have to go into Kansas City. Obviously, no fans, so it won't be the same atmosphere. But I think they'll still give them a tough run for their money. And they have to play the Rams in Los Angeles. So I think that's going to be another tough game for them. So for myself, me and Malcolm both gave our rankings for positions. And for myself, I have Tom Brady ranked number 7. Where do you have him ranked?
I have number 9.
So who do you
So
have him?
still in the top
Who
10.
are the 2 spots that you don't have him above? If I
So
may
like,
ask,
who do I have at
who
number
are 7 and
number
8?
7 and 8? Well, 8 we'll get into later because he's later on this list, in this division, and I think it's kind of obvious when you point that out. But number 7, I'd have Kyler Murray.
Okay,
I think once we get into
he's
Kyler
inside my
Murray,
top 10. So
yeah. So I think it's still respectable, and with Kyler Murray being Kyler Murray and his offense and his weapons, but Tom Brady being able to have the receiving core that he does, and he has his best friend tight end back on his team. He has Bruce Arians, who's not a bad coach himself. I think he's going to really pop off this year in fantasy. You'll see the receivers in Tampa Bay. We'll get into them later, but you'll see them flourish too because they have a quarterback who's not going to be 30 and 30 touchdowns, 30 interceptions. Jameis Winston, eat that L, whatever.
it's a W.
I know. I'm just saying he took an L though for the 30 interceptions. But yeah, Tom Brady. So I have him second in this division among quarterbacks as well. So yeah, number 9 is where I have him.
I don't know. I think Tom Brady is decreasing in age. That you're not seeing the gunslinger he used to be. A lot of check downs, so not like very, very glorious fantasy numbers, but he does it at a high efficiency. So, I mean, you can't really blame him for that. Receptions will be there. Completions, excuse me,
Hmm.
will be there. But
Yeah.
yardage wise is an issue for me.
But
Running
what
back,
about the yards? What about the yards after catch though?
that's for your receivers. It doesn't count for Brady. Running
Yeah,
back,
because that's passing yards.
checkdowns don't make it in the league, man. That's why you're going to suck this year. Running back,
They'll have it.
Ronald Jones the second is the premier back for Tampa Bay this year. He's got last year, excuse me, had 724 yards rushing and 309 yards receiving to go for a total of 6 touchdowns. The perfect dual threat running back for Tom Brady's system because he likes to run with those kind of backs. Obviously, James White, if you're a Patriots fan, you know him very well. Sony Michel's trying to evolutionize his game to be like James White. Could be a high value in PPR leagues and quick checkdowns because that's Brady's specialty, as we all know very well. Key games to watch for me to see Ronald Jones flourish and or suffer would be at Denver with how good their interior defense is. Obviously, the Rams
Yeah.
and Chiefs we've already mentioned, and the Vikings as well. I think the interior alignment of the Vikings with Danielle Hunter, Linval Joseph could give Jones some fits. So I don't know if you take the risk on him. I don't know. But for myself, I have him 26th in my running back rankings. I think he's just under that running back 2 option. Obviously, you could start him there at running back 2 or put him on your bench. So I wouldn't be my first choice to have, obviously, for my running back 2 position, but a solid backup.
I have him in the exact same spot, 26 overall, and I think he's a good flex, like to have on your flex. Uh, I know in PPR leagues you're probably going to want to have that receiver in, but like you said, he's a dual threat running back as well, so he can get those catches if, let's say, Tampa Bay is going to go in to play against like a heavy loaded defense. Let's say like Pittsburgh Steelers, if they did, but they're not. But let's say the Steelers, because Steelers are so great that they're going to cover those top 3 options in the outfield that
You
Ronald
also
Jones
playing
may.
baseball?
Oh, um, they'll have to They'll have to do some pass options to Ronald Jones, and I think he'll be able to flourish there and get a lot of catches and a lot of yards running too
Yeah, hopefully it's not a
on the
one-trick
flex.
pony. Hopefully it's not a one-trick pony like he had last year with the breakout season. So hopefully he can regain that momentum.
Yeah,
Receivers, arguably the best receiving core in all of football. Tampa Bay Buccaneers got Chris Godwin, we're going to start with first. 86 receptions last year for 1,333 yards and 9 touchdowns. He ranked the top 10 last year in the NFL in snaps, routes, yardage, and touchdowns. So obviously he played up big for whoever had him last year in fantasy. I think he's more of an asset than the next mention we're about to mention, Mike Evans, due to Brady's decreasing arm strength. Obviously, Evans is your vertical threat, and I would love to see Chris Godwin line up in the slot all the time right beside Mike Evans to give cornerbacks and safeties fits. So I think Chris Godwin's in another major year this year. I have him number 6 overall in wide receiver rankings. Obviously, he's going to be a solid number 1. Probably will go in the second or third round, depending on what your PPR league is or not. So hopefully he goes higher. But number 6 in wide receiver rankings, Chris Godwin. Hopefully an all-pro season for the kid.
yeah, I have him exact same spot again, number 6. Just out the top 5 because the top 5 are kind of like a different tier of wide receivers in my opinion. For like at least my top 5, it's kind of like a different tier of wide receivers, and then you get to tier 2, and you start off with Chris Godwin, and he's been playing great. Obviously, being the number 2 option, kind of a lot of people would say, but I think he'll slowly turn into maybe that number 1 option, even though the other guy is not that bad. And we'll get into the other guy now, where I have him, and I think a lot of people would have Mr. Mike Evans, like you've already mentioned, still in that top 10 in their fantasy rankings for receivers, and that's exactly where I have him right at number 9.
Yeah, I have him as number 8, and we're going to go into the stats real quick just before we go back to that.
Yeah,
67 receptions last year for Mike Evans to go for 1,157 yards and 8 scores. Could see production decrease slightly again due to not having the gunslinger you have at Jameis Winston being the erratic arm that he had. So Tom Brady, I think, will be a lot more conservative to when he takes deep shots, like before Jameis Winston throwing 30 picks, like you've already said. Consistency is an issue for me with Mike Evans. He had 53% of his total fantasy points came in 3 games last year.
yeah,
So it could be, again, very high, low risk gamble if you're taking Mike Evans. Obviously, his track record kind of made Johnny Football, but that's just me. That's why he stopped in the NFL because he doesn't Mike Evans throwing. Doesn't obviously will not be having the interception king like you already mentioned, Jameis Winston throwing the ball. So we could see reception numbers increase due to the erratic arm, like you've already said. So key games, just as a whole for Buccaneer receivers, is only 2. So I think Buccaneers receivers are good bets to have for your fantasy team. They have to go into Chicago to play the Bears. You know how great that secondary core is. Eddie Jackson,
Yeah.
obviously. And they have to play LA Rams. Jalen Ramsey's going to be matched up against one of these two, so we'll see who. That's going to be very interesting to see where the number 1 cornerback gets matched up. If it's going to be against Godwin or if it's going to be against Evans. So it should be interesting. Obviously, you'll know probably 2 or 3 days prior to your lineups being set. So if you know that, start either one of them because they're both solid wide receiver number 1 contenders. But he's number 8 for me because he's just a proven wide receiver in this league. He knows how to play. He can catch the ball. There's no drop issues. And he's a great run off the catch guy. And big hands.
If he's number 8, then who's number I'm at number 9, so who's your number 9?
Well, if I just pull it up here real quick for the fans, my number 9 in the receiving core would be Amari Cooper for the Cowboys.
Wow. Yeah.
So. And if I go back to my notes now, thank you very much, Malcolm. Tight end is the next position, and everybody knows you don't have to be a football fan to know that Rob Gronkowski is making a return back to the NFL. So a lot of question marks are being raised on Gronk. Obviously, how much rust is he going to show? The injury-riddled past that he's known for with the Patriots is how much of that concern that might be coming into this season. And obviously, they have a pretty good young stud tight end already in O.J. Howard, which we'll get into in a second. But do you have any concerns if you're drafting Gronk?
I don't think so. Honestly, you have, like you said, you have O.J. Howard as well. If I'm drafting Gronk, well, in my rankings, let's just go to the rankings. I have him 10th overall for tight ends, and that would be 3rd best in this division in the NFC South. Doesn't mean I'm just saying probably this division's probably a better tight end division than almost any other division. But Gronkowski's proved himself when he did play, but like you said, he's had a lot of injuries, but he does have Tom Brady throwing the ball to him, and that's who he's used to. That's what Tom Brady knows him. Gronk knows Tom Brady. They know each other so well. They've played together. They've won how many Super Bowls? 3 Super Bowls together, I think. So I think there's a lot of championship DNA and chemistry together. So yeah, I don't think I think it's a gamble for sure because you don't know what he's going to be like coming back. And like you said, you have O.J. Howard coming back with the team, and then you have the 2 wide receivers in Godwin and Evans who are going to get a lot of targets. So I don't see him being that primary option Brady had him on with the Patriots, but he's still a reliable option for him, I think.
Yeah, if you're listening, if you're a Brad, Chad, or Thad in this group, don't draft Gronk with your first tight end pick, okay? I know you're if you're drinking jockey, you're sick. Yeah, have another whatever those are called, jaw drop. Oh, I like to potty. So don't draft Gronk.
Yeah, don't draft him.
If it's your first choice, don't draft him.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're furred up, go ahead. I have him 11th in tight end rankings. You get back in tight end number 1 for me, and you don't know how he's going to show up. If obviously we'll probably do a mid-season show, so if that changes, we'll see. But we get to the second tight end in the mix. O.J. Howard had 34 receptions last year for 459 yards, but just 1 touchdown last season. Again, still could be a viable asset if Gronk needs time back to adjust to game speed or isn't performing up to numbers, or just run a 2 tight end set. I think how New England had great success with Gronkowski and when Martellus Bennett played for that one season. Maybe they run 2 tight end 7 Bruce Arians offense, pass-heavy offense. You never know. Myself, I have him 32nd ranked in the tight ends, back-end bye-week replacement or a heavy matchup that you could see fit. But he should not be up in your starters. Absolutely. I think if anybody has any viable sense in their head, they wouldn't start him. So O.J. Howard hopefully has a breakout season somewhere else.
I have you like the saying, Rome wasn't built in a day, but my fantasy rankings were. I did them all today, so I didn't do as many as Jay did, but I did the top 25. So I don't even have him in my top 25. So I'd say around the 30 mark is where I'd put O.J. Howard as well. He's a guy you shouldn't be really targeting in fantasy. For your tight end position, in my opinion, you have a lot of good other options there in all of football, but especially in this division. We'll get into more of that later. So I don't even have in my top 25. So
Yeah, it's okay. Everyone knows I'm the analyst on the show anyway. It's
yeah,
understandable. For the kicker, we have, and just I think we're gonna go along as it goes here. We're gonna do like rules of fantasy football.
yeah.
If you're watching, don't take a kicker past the 7th round, at least.
Honestly,
Like our friend Nick, no, this was years ago. When Steven Goskowski was Steven Goskowski,
when he
my,
was
my
the
best friend
goat.
Ethan took Steven Goskowski. I like to say it was about 4 years ago. Took Goskowski in the 3rd round. Yeah. But we
No.
shouldn't be laughing because he made the finals that year,
Oh wow.
and he let us heard it. He let us hear about it. But for the Buccaneers, kicker is Matt Gay, 27 of 35 on field goals made, so a little iffy. 43 of 48 extra points, a little iffy. But he did have the 4th most points in fantasy last year, but that is definitely due to a high volume of field goals with 35, which was good for 4th among kickers.
Yeah.
Was his rookie season, so maybe you can chalk some of that misses to rookie jitters. So it could be prime for a sophomore campaign, a good sophomore campaign. Excuse me, good sophomore campaign. But like we said, he does not crack the top 15 kickers in my list. I only made top 15 because there should not be more than one kicker on your lineup. If
Exactly.
you're carrying more than one kicker, you're dust.
Yeah. Why?
Absolute squid.
The only reason you should have like a second kicker on your team is, let's say there's a bye week, but you drop him immediately after.
Exactly.
Immediately
But you
after.
know what? We're in such unprecedented times right now that normally, again, I don't carry more than one quarterback, but who knows?
Mm,
Maybe someone catches COVID and you're screwed for 2 games.
yeah,
And that is a real possibility for kickers. It could be a real possibility for everybody. But I carry more,
that's very
obviously,
true.
for quarterbacks. So lineups could be different, could be seen different than last year. And we go to our defense/special teams for the Bucs. 47 sacks last year, which was good for 7th most overall. 12 picks, 16 fumble recoveries, which was good for 3rd most, and 6 touchdowns, which was 2nd most in the league. So they had 405 points against and 5,503 yards against. They did add Antoine Winfield Jr., the pride of Minnesota Golden Gophers, in the draft, and they will have a healthy Levante David. So you could see more big strides to what was a very big-time year. The defense. Key games to watch if you're trying to pick Buccaneers for your fantasy team is they're going to have to play Green Bay, which, you don't need much
Fair enough.
explanation to hear about Green Bay. And obviously, they have to go play the Super Bowl champion Chiefs and what their high-profile offense brings. So with that all being said, I have them 13th in my defensive ranking. So there's almost a back-end starter. So they have a lot of chances to make the big play. Obviously, 12 INTs and 47 sacks will bring some big numbers to your fantasy team. So 13th is a pretty solid number for myself.
You have them at 13th? Oh,
Yeah.
I have them at 8th, so I have them in the top 10. I have them at
Can you
8th
elaborate?
ranked. Well, if I'm on my phone the first time ever because my computer's not working, so all my notes about them were on my phone for the defense. But I was just going over the players that they have right now, and I
So
feel
Devin
like
White,
they have them like Vita Vea,
Dak
right?
Barrett.
Yeah, Shaq Barrett's a big one. Um, I'm doing a podcast. Bloopers, man. I even told them before I even came up. But yeah, where was I? Yeah, so I think with their heavy loaded offense, they're gonna have to kind of change it up a little bit on defense. But like you said, their defense was amazing last year. Not like Steelers defense, but they're pretty.
We're back. Wi-Fi. Gotta love it. But we go back to the number
You
1 team in the
know,
NFC South. Last season was the New Orleans Saints. And we're going back quarterback to the man who broke the yards record, Drew Brees. Numbers staggered due to missing 6 games last season with a thumb injury. So with the 10 games he played, he had 2,975 yards, 27 touchdowns, and only 4 INTs. So he's a pretty safe bet, obviously, with not
Hmm.
throwing the ball away too much. When healthy, in the games he played for, Breeze was second best quarterback in fantasy last season. Key games to watch for me, they have to go into Chicago. They have to play the 49ers again this year, so you know how much of a shootout that was last year. I don't know if it's going to be the same this time around. And I think a very underrated team next year, or underrated defense, I should say, is the LA Chargers. So, and as well, the Saints have the ninth easiest schedule in terms of strength of schedule in the NFL. So I'm sure Drew Brees is going to have a field day with all the weapons he has as well. He
Yeah.
does cede some snaps to Taysom Hill, so production could be decreased. And as well, he has a great running back, which again we'll get to soon, is Alvin Kamara. So again, could limit the number of passes he throws. So
And they
with
have
all
this
that being said
stellar.
and done, Drew Brees is ranked number 9 inside the top 10 in the quarterback rankings. Again, solid quarterback number 1 and doesn't throw the ball away too much. And he's got great receivers. So a safe bet. Take him as your first quarterback.
And they have a stellar backup in Jameis Winston. But for me, I have him at so I have one spot ahead at number 8 because I had Tom Brady at number 9. So Drew Brees, I have number 8. Like you said, he's been so consistent over the past few years, especially, and he's getting older. But as you said before, there's a lot of snaps where he may not see anymore because of the new players coming in, and they're running back. Their running game is pretty good with Alvin Kamara. Even though Kamara didn't have the season he did last year as he did the year prior, 2 years ago, he still did pretty good. So I think you'll see Alvin Kamara have a kind of like a breakout season this year, if I'm not gonna lie. But Drew Brees is still gonna have, like you said, a field day, just going off with his easy schedule and throwing to probably maybe the best wide receiver in the game right now.
I'll take running back. Like you said, Alvin Kamara, just under 800 yards rushing and 530 yards receiving last season. Probably the best dual threat running back in the game, minus Christian McCaffrey. Has
Okay.
6 touchdowns as well total. Averaged 12.2 carries and 7 targets per game last year. So that's an easy 7 points. You're playing PPR if he catches 7 catches a game. More goal line usage, I think, will raise production. They kind of faulted back on using Kamara in goal line stands, or goal line first and goal, second and goal, third and goal last year. So obviously, touchdown will definitely help that cause. Key games to watch for me to see Kamara shine and/or fault would be at Denver to see how they fare with that front seven. Again, they have to play Philadelphia in Philly. Tough matchup. Nice against Minnesota, and again, they have to play the Chiefs. So with that all being said, he is ranked 5th with my running back rankings. Solid running back number 1. Again, I like to see him stay healthy, play a full 16 games because you can't really bank on that if you're played Alvin Kamara in the past. And hopefully that he plays in playoffs because he didn't play in playoffs last year. And that might have been chalked up to how great the Saints were. So number 5 in running backs is Alvin Kamara.
I'm in between your man crush and the biggest running back in the league, and I have him right at number 4. I think he'll thrive in like you said, the PPR leagues as being the second best dual threat running back in this league, and I don't think you nailed it basically. And like you said, he did have 800 yards rushing last year, right? And the year prior, how many did he have? I think he had. I don't know. Did he not have better than 800 yards the year
I would assume
before?
so.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So like I said, like he didn't have as good of a year last year, but I think he will have a better year this year. Break that 1,000 yard rushing mark and get 500 yards receiving at least. So I
And
think
he's
he'll
also in a contract year, so he's got to secure that bag. So
exactly.
it's
So
got to have to show up big time.
he's gonna go off.
And we're going to talk about Kamara's backup now, Latavius Murray. And he's had 146 carries last year for 637 yards, had 34 receptions for 235 yards, and 6 touchdowns as a backup. Kind of
Pretty
insane.
good.
So
Yeah.
in the 2 weeks Kamara was injured, he was fantasy's number 1 running back with 307 yards and 4 touchdowns in those 2 games. So if Kamara goes out, I would snatch up Latavius Murray like that because I think he's going to be he's going to play some good numbers if you go by his track record when Kamara's not playing. But obviously, you don't want to root for Kamara not getting hurt. So with that being said, he's ranked 47th in the running back rankings just because I think he's got a lot of potential. And I think he's probably going to end up being the number one back in New Orleans if they don't want to sign Kamara for big money.
Yeah, I had him last year because I had Kamara as well. And when Kamara got injured, I'm
Again,
like,
that's
man,
another rule I would like to just point out for fantasy. Don't pick two running backs or two receivers from the same team.
no, I didn't pick them from the same team. When Kamara got injured, I
Okay.
picked up Latavius Murray because I'm like, okay, I'll pick up his backup. I'm like, he has to be good. Like when he was on the Vikings, I'm pretty sure he was on the Vikings
He
beforehand,
was?
right? Yeah. So when he was on the Vikings, I knew he was good. So I'm like, okay, pick him up. He was good in the Vikings. He'll probably do good, and he did perform well. Not like the rest of my team, but he did perform well for the time that he was out. I don't have him in the ranking here because I have top 42, but he would still be in the top 50 for me for sure. It's still, I don't, you shouldn't be targeting him in the draft, in a fantasy
No,
draft. You should not be targeting Latavius Murray with Alvin Kamara because it's only if Kamara gets hurt should you pick him up, really.
absolutely. It's too big of a gamble to count on 3
Yeah.
or 4 targets a game. That's counting runs. We move to the receivers next. It's probably arguably the best receiver in all of football, Mr. Can't guard Mike, Ohio State's own Michael Thomas. 149 receptions last year, which happens to be the receptions record. How are ya? With 1,725 yards. Number one overall pick for myself last year. Worked out pretty good. Outscored the next closest receiver by 99 fantasy points.
Kind of insane.
Obviously, you cannot bank on having 725 yards and breaking the reception record again for next season, but he could come pretty damn well close to it. But again, could see production limited due to the addition of the next person we're going to get to real quick, Emmanuel Sanders. But obviously, is still a highly touted player, and he knows how to get open. Very shifty,
Yeah.
very crafty, amazing route runner. And Drew Brees, probably one of the best quarterbacks in all of football, so you'll know how to find him.
I think
So,
we both have him at the same spot here, too.
absolutely. Number one in wide receiver rankings. There's no question. If you have him
No
somewhere else,
question.
you're on crack cocaine. But he possibly could be the number one overall player depending on what league you're playing and depending on what kind of needs you need to start off your
Yeah.
fantasy league and how much you
Personally, I
value
would
your receivers
personally
rather than running backs.
I would in the fantasy overall, I would project him to be number 2 pick, second overall.
Well, we gotta be different. You can't pick like we also know the number one's gonna pick. We gotta be different. The next receiver who came via Denver, via San Francisco, Emmanuel Sanders had 56 receptions last season for 869 yards and 5 6-point touchdowns. Primary slot receiver for Breeze, which he desperately needs. I don't know if Ted Ginn Jr. can really fill the void that Emmanuel Sanders can, so definitely an upgrade in that position. He was top 20 in catch rate the last 2 seasons for Sanders, excuse me. Key games in general for Saints receivers to play against is, again, at Chicago. At Denver, they have to play against Justin Simmons, Chris Harris Jr., so that might be a tough matchup for them. And Minnesota Vikings, they go Harrison Smith. But corner's kind of a shaky spot for Minnesota, but obviously a Paul Hunter like Harrison Smith you got to watch out for. But sticking with Emmanuel Sanders, he is number 40 in my wide receiver rankings. I have him slotted as a solid flex option and a back end wide receiver 2 pick. What about yourself?
I did top 30, right? But I also did
Oh.
sleepers for running backs and wide receivers. And he cracked my list. There's only 6 sleepers that I picked, and Emmanuel Sanders is one of them because, like you said, he can be a pretty good wide receiver 2/flex option in a good standard or PPR league. Because obviously people are going to start double teaming Michael Thomas like they did Antonio Brown when he was good on the Steelers. It's good. But you think about it. He just broke the reception record. Everyone's like, oh, this guy's the best. He's going to secure the bag, blah, blah, blah. So you got to have some other options on this team, and you have your tight end who we'll get into later as well. But Emmanuel Sanders can be that great number 2 option that Drew Brees looks out for.
And he's
can
very
get a lot
dependable. He's
exactly.
not a rookie. He's very established player in the league, and he's not getting any younger at 31. So he's a man. He's a moneymaker. Tight end, Jared Cook, 43 receptions last year for 705 yards and 9 touchdowns. Breakout season for the kid. which really can't call it kick. He's quite up there in age, but finally nice to see him have a very solid season. Huge red zone threat last year for the Saints. Had 11 end zone targets, tied for the most among tight ends. So if that's looking for a fantasy player, it's huge. Easy 7 points with the 1 PPR and the 6-point touchdown. With that being said, he's number 8 in my tight end rankings. This mid to back end tight end number 1. If you value tight ends in your league and for yourself, I would let him slide because I don't think much people are taking Jared Cook. Again, not a
Yeah,
household name. So I think it'd be a very solid pickup later in your draft.
I have him at number 8 as well. And like he's first in this division though, in the NFC South. So he's still a good option. So you, like we said before, you have Thomas and you have Sanders looking out for, and you have Kamara too, because Drew Brees is always looking for Kamara out of the backfield. But Jared Cook in the end zone is just a lethal weapon. Okay, he's a big guy, but you also, when you compare him to, like you said, the household names, you don't really, when you think of best tight ends in the league, Jared Cook doesn't pop into your mind, but he's almost like a sleeper. You could kind of say he's a sleeper if you don't get your tight ends, which there are a few, like let's say top 5 of the big names. Let's say you don't get any one of them, and you get Jared Cook. That's not a
He'll be
bad thing.
happy. He'll be happy.
It's not, yeah, it's not a bad thing at all. So
He's
Jared Cook,
probably gonna get
number 8.
lost in the fold. Like you say, he's probably gonna get lost in the fold with defenses because you're gonna have to worry about Mike Thomas. You're gonna have to worry about Emmanuel Sanders. You're gonna have to worry about Alvin Kamara. So it's gonna be a big whoring out party again for Jared Cook this year. But for household names, you go to the kicker, it's going to be Will the Thrill Lutz. Mr. Dependable. 32 of 36 field goals made. Just missed 1 extra point, 48 of 49. 3 for 5 on 50-plus field goals, which is quite solid. He's perfect from inside 40 yards. He was second in kicker rankings last year. Or excuse me, second in my kicker rankings this year. High-end starter. There's no question about it. He should be definitely, if not number 1 in other people's minds. But don't be taking kickers out in the 7th round or higher. Just don't. Please save yourself the time. Save yourself the anguish. Don't
I
do
feel
it.
like what I hate to say too, in the league that we're currently in, I feel like there's going to be a few people, not going to name names because I don't want to cause people to cry, because they actually do watch the podcast. But I want you guys to actually listen to us right now. Don't take a kicker in the 7th round. It's not going to be fun. But I feel like you guys will. But let's.
You know what that's called, though? That's called easy money for me.
It is called
It's called easy money.
But like, I want it to be competitive. You know, I want every single team.
Coming from the guy who finished 4-10 last year. But we
with
go to
no
the
pay,
defense with New
pay.
Orleans.
Didn't
At
even say
50,
where I had Will Lutz, but whatever. I had him at 3rd. But yeah, we'll go to the defense now.
Beautiful. 51 sacks, 13 INTs, 10 fumble recoveries, 4 scores, 341 points against, 5,329 yards against. I think the number's a bit straight because of the absolute shootout they had with the 49ers last year.
Nasty.
With both teams gave up 40-plus. Notables that left the team this year was linebacker, Ohio State's own Von Bell, cornerback, Ohio State's own Eli Apple, and A.J. Klein, linebacker, all left the team. But they did add safety, Ohio State's own Malcolm Jenkins, cornerback Janoris Jenkins, and linebacker Alex Anzalone. Malcolm Jenkins, I think, is a question mark if he's going to play this season or not because of how much he's taken to the Black Lives Matter movement and social justice change. So I don't know if you're going to be seeing Malcolm Jenkins play this year. But question, who knows? You need to get paid.
Yeah.
But key games for the defense to watch for, again, they have to play Green Bay. They're going to have to play San Francisco. They're playing Philadelphia. I think it's a very underrated offense in Philadelphia. And they have to play the Chiefs. So that's, I would say, 3 of the top 5 offenses in all of football they have to play. So, and that being said, I think they're 6th in my defensive rankings, which would be a mid to back end starter. Because you can't ignore what the players they have on the roster. Obviously, they have Marshawn Lattimore playing corner, Marcus Davenport defensive end, Cam Jordan. It's a very star-studded roster. So hopefully, I'd like to see them make some strides and not giving up as many points. But I'd like to see them being 6th overall in my defense rankings.
We have too many big names, in my opinion, to not be top 5, and I have them at number 4. And they have a lot to prove. Like you said, they're playing a lot of hard teams this year. So they're gonna.
That's why they're 6 for me. I don't think they're top 5 just because of the schedule they have.
I think they're going to try to prove themselves that they are top 5, and they are number 4 in my opinion. Behind some pretty good defenses, obviously. But the rest of the teams that they're gonna have to face, we don't know. You never know how a football season's gonna pan out. You had no idea Kansas City.
So
Like no
that's why
one
the
can.
safe bet is 6 instead of 4.
No, it's 4. It's definitely 4 because 6 for me is something else. But we will get into that when we get to the AFC.
Okay. So next up, Carolina Panthers quarterback making his return to the starting job. It's Teddy Two Gloves in Teddy Bridgewater. Played only 6 games last season, replacing Drew Brees with a thumb injury, and showed up, winning all 6 of the games. 1,384 yards, 9 touchdowns, only 2 INTs, and a 68% completion rate. But with that being said, he's kind of Tom Brady 2.0 when it comes to throwing the ball. He likes the 5-yard dump offs, 2-yard checkdowns. Could run a formidable read option with the should be league MVP Christian McCaffrey, but no one gives it to running backs nowadays. But I
Hmm.
think there's again serious question marks on his knee. He wants to test the waters. Obviously, RG3, you know what happened with his knee, never really been the same after. But Bridgewater's kind of regained his confidence to become a starter back in Carolina, so hopefully he can return to what he was in Minnesota, but running the football. Does have a rookie head coach in Matt Rule, so hopefully he doesn't hinder his decision making. Key games to watch for the Panthers, Teddy Bridgewater. They had to play Tennessee, they have to play the Chiefs, and they have to play the Chargers. So I think they're going to suffer mightily in those games rather than, and like, obviously you had to play the Saints twice and you had to play the Buccaneers twice. So it's
Yeah.
a very, very tough schedule. So, and again, we don't know how good Teddy Bridgewater is going to be for a whole 16-game season. So he is 24th in my quarterback rankings, fringe, back end, backup quarterback if you want to keep 2 quarterbacks on your roster, or just look as a bye week replacement and in your free agency pool.
I'm at 23rd, so very close to your ranking, and surprisingly behind Baker Mayfield. Just because Baker's trash. I'll just say that every episode that he's not deserving of top 15. I'm going to be saying this every episode. Just a heads up to everyone, Baker Mayfield is trash and he is overrated. But yeah, we'll get back to Teddy now. He's 23rd for me. Like you said, we don't know how he's going to play in Carolina. He doesn't have a lot of
Oh,
weapons
sorry.
either.
You know this guy here? I'm sure.
Make the playoffs. Make the playoffs.
Mayfield.
Um,
Rookie touchdown record. Keep going.
but we don't know how he's going to play. He doesn't have a lot of weapons. He does have some good players, obviously, on his team, but there's no one that stands out like does on Tampa Bay or New Orleans does, or Atlanta, the other team in the other division. So there's no one that he can really be like that number one guy and go to and be sure that he's going to get a lot of passes completed and a lot of yards out of one guy. So he's going to have to find a way and use all of his threats to be a good quarterback this year and maybe get Carolina in a good position for playoffs, but I really don't see them making it out of the playoffs. I mean, into the playoffs at all. And I don't see him being a top fantasy prospect for you to look up for as well. He's, like you said, he should be a bench quarterback or, get him on a bye week when your quarterback's playing.
We go to the other end of the spectrum. It should be the number 1 overall player in fantasy drafts all across the country and the United States is Run CMC, Stanford Cardinals' own Christian McCaffrey, who had over 1,300 yards rushing and 1,000 yards receiving with 19 majors. Outscored the next closest running back by a measly 156 fantasy points last year. He was on field for 93% of offensive snaps last season. So if you could find anybody in your fantasy league who has more than 90% of your offensive snaps, I think production's going to be pretty high.
I think this guy should have won the MVP last year. That's my opinion. We'll just leave it at that. But yeah, I think we both have him in the same spot as well, though, as Michael Thomas was at numero uno.
But obviously, you cannot bank on having 1,000-yard rushing, 1,000-yard receiving every year. But again, could happen. But key games to watch to see if McCaffrey suffers is the Chargers, the Chiefs, the Vikings, the Washington football team is what it's being called, the Washington football team, because I think their front seven could shake some heads this year. Obviously, Chase Young just signed today, 4 years, $34 million. So let's see how much fits he gives front seven offensive linemen. Jonathan Allen, Montez Sweat, De'Aaron Payne. So if all four of those guys show up like they're supposed to be, could bring some fits to running backs. And obviously, you had to play the Packers as well. But yes, number one running back in my rankings should be number one in your fantasy draft if you're going to be so lucky to get number one overall.
Yeah, I think it's a steal. If you get and even in fantasy drafts, in my opinion, you don't want to get number one in a snake draft, especially. I personally don't like getting number one. I like to be kind of like at the number. Let's say you have a 10-man league. I like to be around 4 or 6. But if you do get that number one
screw
spot,
number 5.
yeah, basically. But if you do like that number one pick, if you do get it, I feel like you have to take Christian McCaffrey or the aforementioned Michael Thomas. Both in this division, both the best in their positions, which is kind of crazy when you think about just one division and you have the best running back and wide receiver in both the same division.
Nasty. Receivers, 2018 first-round pick DJ Moore, 87 receptions for 1,175 yards and 4 scores. For me, touchdown production needs to increase, but I think you could thank Mr. McCaffrey for stealing all those touchdowns away from receivers. He was top 10 in the NFL last year in routes, targets, receptions, and receiving yards. And he only has 3 career drops. So if he's getting thrown the ball, I think there's a pretty good chance he's catching it. So with that all being said, he's number 16 in my wide receiver rankings. Back end wide receiver number 1, but a very high end wide receiver number 2. So don't waste your first pick on the receiver on DJ Moore, but if he falls to you and falls back in the draft, snag him up. Because again, I don't know how much receiving competition there is for number 1. So DJ Moore, number 16.
Yeah, I have him number 15, and I think you should take him in the 4th or 5th round, in my opinion. If he does get there, because maybe someone gets him 3rd round because they're feeling lucky and they put all their money in DJ Moore. Or a Panthers fan. I don't hear many of those, although. So I'd say 4th or 5th round's a good round to pick DJ Moore. And like we said, there's no number 1 in Carolina. So I think it's time to prove himself that he is number 1. He has Teddy Bridgewater, who played pretty good for the time being. That Drew Brees, like you said, was injured last year. So they both have something to prove, in my opinion. And I feel like if they get that connection and have the determination to prove themselves and put up a lot of points, get a lot of yards, get a lot of touchdowns, I think DJ Moore is going to be a solid player in this league and a solid fantasy player.
Yeah, he definitely needs to show up again after having a breakout second season. So hopefully he can regain the success he had. Next up, Robbie Anderson, coming over from the New York Jets, had 52 receptions for 779 yards and 5 majors. He's very, very durable. He's played 62 of a career 64 games, so he's going to be in your lineup every week. He's going to have a dependable quarterback rather than the king of mono himself, Sam Darnold. So I think you can see his numbers increase in both receptions, yards, and scores. But although he probably is not going to be a focal point in the Carolina offense, but everything is kind of run around Christian McCaffrey. So with that all being said, he's number 43 in my wide receiver rankings. He's a back-end flex or just a matchup, maybe, or a good matchup. If you see a good matchup, if he's playing a shitty team, start Robbie Anderson.
I don't have him inside my top 30, and I don't have him as a sleeper. Doesn't mean he's not a good player.
He was the best receiver for the Jets last season.
Exactly. So he's still a good player. And like you said, I think a lot of people see Sam Darnold as like an overrated type of player, but I see him kind of as an underrated player, and he still has time to break out.
So does Baker Mayfield. No, same draft, buddy.
Baker's just trash. But yeah, I feel like Robbie Anderson's been good for having Sam Darnold, who's not a complete quarterback yet, and he can be good and even
Sam
better.
Darnold is trash.
Maybe great with Teddy Bridgewater, depending on how Teddy plays and if his injuries let him play for the whole year. But Robbie Anderson, he's still, like you said, I think a good flex player in a PPR draft and a good bench player to have in case you like a good bench receiver to have. But I wouldn't have him in your top 1 or 2 for sure.
Absolutely
as a
not.
receiver. Yeah.
Maybe you if you want to give me your money, but easy.
Yeah.
Tight end is Ian Thomas, departure of Greg Olson is going to have some
Mm.
big, yeah, I get the chills too. His big shoes to fill. Last season had a huge 16 reception year for 136 yards and one score. Kind of sounds like my numbers in intramural football, if you ask anybody. Last among tight ends in catch rate at 56% and drop rate at 10. Thought David Njoku, the Browns, probably led the league in drop rate last season, but he didn't really play, so that saved his bacon. He is only a third-year player, and the keys have been given to him, so to make that kind of number one job. So maybe he can surprise some heads, but I don't see him surprising anybody.
Yeah.
He is number 33 in my tight end rankings. He's a back-end bye-week replacement. Stand clear of Ian Thomas, with all due respect. Don't be taking him.
Oh, I have him at number 15. No, I'm kidding. He's out of my top 25 because I only have 25 tight ends, and he's not in there. But I wouldn't even have him in my top 30 if I did have 30 tight ends here, because, like you said, he would be in this division. He'd be the last ranked tight end. Like for each team, if he had one per
Without a
team, he'd
question.
obviously, with no doubt about it, he's the last ranked tight end. And I think he'd be maybe the last guy you think about to draft in this in your fantasy league. Don't even think about it, in my opinion. He's not going to shock anyone. There's a lot of other viable options that you can choose from on a lot of other great teams. So, in my opinion, he's just a write-off. Don't even think about him. Take him off your mind.
Speaking
Forget we
of
talked about
write-offs,
him.
we have the kicker Joey Sly. Had 25 of 32 field goals made and 31 of 35 extra points made. The kicker is kind of a question mark in Carolina because we don't know who's really going to be starting. If it's going to be Graham Gano or if it's going to be Joey Sly. So staying clear of the Carolina kickers because you don't know how much production you get either of them. So
Yeah.
obviously you did not make my top 15 in kicker rankings.
Me neither. Not even close.
And speaking of not even close, we have the Carolina defense who had 53 sacks, 10 picks, 7 fumble recoveries, and only 1 score. ESPN has them ranked as the dead last defense in the NFL, and I think it's a pretty good place to keep them at.
Yeah, just don't even think about it. Like, you can skip through this part of the video because we're not even going to talk about them.
But that's quick because we're off to the Atlanta Falcons next and the last team in the NFC South. Quarterback, it's Matty Ice. Matt Ryan, who had 4,466 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions. He led the league in completions with 408, and it was top 6 in the NFL in passing yards. Top end receiving core in my mind, with 5 out of his 7 offensive linemen were first-round picks. So you have a lot of talent up front. Key games to watch to see if Matt Ryan flourishes is against Green Bay, against Minnesota, and against the Chiefs. And Atlanta does have the 5th hardest schedule in all of the NFL. So again, with that all being said, Matty Ice is 10th in the quarterback rankings. He is a back-end quarterback number 1 because, again, you really can't count out a former league MVP. So I think he's 10th.
Because of his hard schedule, like he did perform well last year. He put up one of the most points among quarterbacks. But still, because of his hard schedule, I'm outside the top 10, right at number 11. He's still not a bad quarterback. You should still consider him. Let's say you were in a 12-man league like we are, kind of dumb, and all those quarterbacks are gone, like all the big names that you can think about and all the young guns that are out there that you think are going to be pretty great, like maybe Josh Allen or something like that, not Baker Mayfield. Then yeah, maybe consider Matt Ryan, but I don't see him. I don't see you shouldn't be like targeting him to be your number 1 quarterback. You want to kind of look for someone else, and hopefully you do get someone else. But he's not a bad option at the same time. But he's like the back end towards a QB1 and more of a QB2 if you carry 2 QBs on your team.
Yeah, it's kind of like your vanilla ice cream, you know it's good, but you don't want to reach for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Just generic.
Good analogy.
Running back, we have the former LA Ram, former Georgia Bulldog coming home. It's Todd Gurley, 857 yards rushing with 207 yards receiving. You can do the Brock math. That's over 1,000 all-purpose yards. So he's got 14 touchdowns to his name, but here's the question mark. Is he healthy?
I don't know. And we saw him with the Rams, and he had that good season 2 years ago with the Rams where he was just stellar, and I just want to tell a Todd Gurley story where if you had Todd Gurley on your team, he would make those plays where were team moments or like selfless moments where he'd go down, he'd have an open lane to the end
Yes.
zone, and he'd slide down right before
Young
the end
fantasy
zone.
players, man.
And fantasy players crying. He's like, he go on Twitter like, I don't care about your fantasy, so maybe you don't reach for him this year. I don't see anyone reaching for him. I have him at number 20. So he's still like maybe an RB2 and a bench RB in my opinion. Among in your league, more of an RB2 because I have him at number 20. So don't think, in my opinion, don't like say, oh, he's gonna have a breakout year with Atlanta, because I don't know if he will, because I see them more of a pass heavy team, and they do have two great receivers who we'll get into that Matt Ryan can throw to. So
Yeah, obviously there is no competition right now in Atlanta to have Todd Gurley's backup role. So durability and workload are major question marks for myself on Todd Gurley because obviously he's coming off an injury-riddled season last year. Key games to watch out for Todd Gurley, and there's a lot of them. He has to play some formidable front sevens with Dallas, Green Bay, Minnesota, Chargers, and the Chiefs. So a lot of big games for Atlanta to play against. So Todd Gurley could see numbers decline. But with that all being said, I have him 21st with my running back rankings. I think he's a front end to middle running back 2 option. Obviously, you should not be your first running back taken. If you're that, you should probably quit your league, give your money in already.
honestly,
But
just each
if you're lucky to
transfer
have him
over.
on your bench, kudos to you. Whatever league you're playing in. But we move to receivers, like you already said, Alabama's pride and Julio Jones, 99 receptions last year for 1,394 yards with 6 touchdowns. He
He's
averaged
he's
over 10 targets per game last season, so he's going to get the ball a lot.
nasty.
Production, though, could slip if Gurley shows form. But like you've already mentioned, Atlanta does have a pass-heavy offense, so your money's safe with Julio Jones. So that all being said, I have him ranked number 4 in my
Ooh,
quarterback rankings. Definitely solid numbers. Wide receiver number 1
you mean
should be
wide
going
receiver?
should be in your second or third round in your
Yeah,
fantasy draft. So number 4, it's Julio.
I'm at number 3, but like you said, like I said before, in my top 5 is like a
I
tier
know who your
one
number
of
4
your.
is, so I know So why is he better than DeAndre Hopkins?
Oh, because with DeAndre Hopkins, you have Larry Fitz and you have Kyler Murray, who's going to be running the ball a lot, and you have David Johnson. Like same thing with
David
Todd
Johnson is
Gurley
on
though.
Houston, my friend.
Oh
It's
yeah,
Kenyon
what's
Drake is the
Kenyon Drake?
Arizona Cardinals running
Yeah, I
back.
always mix up the A's, but yeah, Kenyon Drake, who comes out of the backfield. So that's even better to prove my point, because I was going to say David Johnson's injury riddle all the time, but Kenyon Drake, he's someone who's trying to prove himself too. So I think they're going to get a lot more running in Arizona. And DeAndre Hopkins, obviously, he was that go-to guy, and it was always good with no matter what quarterback he had. And he came out and said this. Remember, he's like, "Oh, I was good with Brock Osweiler as my quarterback." Like, I know he's good, but I have Julio being a taller guy, deep threat for Matt Ryan, always reliable for Matt Ryan, except for that one drop pass I remember him having last year or 2 years ago in the end zone. But other than that, I just have him above John Chop. But like I said before, this top 5 that I have is a tier 1, and you can't go wrong with any of them. You can scramble these top 5 around. Maybe other than Michael Thomas, like
Thank you.
keep him at number 1. But the other 4 in my top 5, you can really scramble them around, and they'll be wherever they are, and you won't go wrong by picking any one of these guys. So, but I have Julio Jones. Personally, I would take him as the number 3 receiver in a fantasy draft.
Yeah, I'll say the DeAndre Hopkins talk for the NFC West. So
Yeah.
next up on the receiver talk is Calvin Ridley, another Alabama kid. 63 receptions last year for 866 yards and 7 touchdowns as your second wide receiver in Atlanta. Does have a 69% career catching percentage, you Fox. No real wide receiver number 3 on the team due to the departure of Muhammad Sanu Sr., so expect big things from young Ridley.
Yes.
We'd like to see him play a lot of slot receiver. He's an impressive route runner, so obviously don't line him up across from Julio Jones. Line him here or here by Matt Ryan. So definitely a nice crossing route players, slants, easy money, easy catches, easy first downs. With that being said, he's number 23 in my wide receiver rankings. He's a solid wide receiver number 2. in your fantasy lineup.
Yeah,
So again, don't pick Julio and cover in the same team. Don't do that, please.
yeah. But Calvin Ridley, I'm at number 22, and I've had him on my team. I don't know if I had him last year, but I remember having him 2 or 3 years consecutively before that, and he was maybe probably 2 years because he's still quite young. But he's been a reliable option. Like you can't go wrong putting him in there because when Julio Jones is covered, it's most likely going to Calvin Ridley, or it was Mohamed Sanu. But Calvin Ridley broke out. He proved himself that he's a good number two option out of Atlanta. He's a good number two option for your fantasy team. So 22 in the wide receiver core, but you can't go wrong. I say picking him around like the 6th or 7th round.
Tight end, we have the first-year starter in Hayden Hurst coming from Baltimore. 30 receptions last year for 349 yards and 2 touchdowns as the backup role. And I think he can easily double these numbers if
Yeah.
this year not playing behind arguably again one of the better tight ends in football, Mark Andrews.
Yep.
That being said, he was 6th in tight ends and catch rate at 77%. I think he's worth taking the gamble due to the high track record of past Atlanta tight ends. If you could just think in the last 20 years, it's been Tony Gonzalez and Austin Hooper. 2 tight
Yeah.
ends to play 20 years. I think you can't go wrong with Atlanta tight ends. So that being said, as a first-year starter in tight end, I have him ranked 10th in tight end rankings. He's a back-end tight end number 1. Obviously, don't go out of your way to take Hayden Hurst. If besides your way, take him.
I have him at number 9 as the second best tight end in this division, behind Jared Cook, and then right in front of Gronk. So I have them at 8, 9, and 10. And before I talk about Hayden Hurst, I just want you to realize Austin Hooper's not going to be anything special with the Cleveland Browns. Don't get too excited.
When we get to that division, I'll read you his numbers because they're astounding.
I know they're astounding, but he has Baker throwing him the ball. But Hayden Hurst has Matt Ryan, MVP, throwing him the ball. And when Julio and Calvin they're not open, Hayden Hurst can be that other guy who's like, oh, hey, look, I'm wide open. More like I see. And if I had to compare him to another tight end who's kind of older but not really older, is Eric.
I think he's a poor man's Travis Kelce.
Travis Kelce. Well, that's a good comparison. I actually like that comparison.
Poor
better.
man's
Never
Travis
mind.
Kelce.
Won't even consider mine. Yeah, he's just like a poor man's Travis Kelce. But the same thing, like you said, don't reach for him. Don't, if you can, get a better tight end because the top, like from Jared Cook on, from top 8 for me at least,
They're Pro
are
Bowlers.
pretty good. Exactly, they're all Pro Bowlers and they're all pretty young as well. It's not like they're a bunch of older guys. So look out for other tight ends and don't consider Hayden Hurst to be that number 1 tight end for you.
Yeah, we got kicker. Our last position is kicker. The man who got 3 onside kicks in one game is Young Ho Koo. 23 of 26 field goals and 15 of 16 for extra points. Obviously, it's a small sample size, so we don't know he's going to do it a full season. He only kicked once over 50 yards. He obviously made it, but he had one kick of over 50 yards, so hopefully he gets more than that this year. This is going to be his first full season, so with that being said, it's kind of treating him as a rookie. I'll have him 15th in my kicker rankings right back end starter. He should be your last player taken in the draft.
Yeah, I have at number 15 too of the top 15 kickers that I've had. But like you said, yeah, don't.
I think you'll have a Chad Browder with that. Who's going to take him just because his name is Young Ho.
Young Ho Koo. Yeah. Someone's gonna be like, "Well, his name's pretty sick, so I think we gotta pick him at like the 8th round, bro." No, don't even think about it. If you have
That's
to pick him dead last, but he's not a bad pick at dead last. So yeah. And then
the last position is the defense for Atlanta.
Yeah.
28 sacks, 12 picks, 8 fumble recoveries, 3 scores. Had 375 points against, 5,693 yards against. They did add linebacker, defensive end Dante Fowler Jr. from the LA Rams, but kind of the defense is quite old and quite washed up, if you ask me. So I don't think they do not crack my top 15 at defense rankings. They are a back-end replacement team in my mind. So if they see a good matchup and your regular defense is on the bye, pick them up.
Same for me. I have a top 16, and they don't even crack that. So yeah, like you said, don't even just if they're in a bye week and they have a good team to play against. Maybe they're playing the Browns, and pick them up, put them in your lineup.
Yeah, Floyd and Perry say it so well. Pick them up. But there you have it. It's the NFC South Fantasy Rankings. We'll be back next Friday on Fantasy Fridays on Unfinished Business to bring you the next division for fantasy football. And until we see you next time tomorrow for the weekly recap, this is Jacob.
And Money Malcolm.
This episode of Unfinished Business is presented by Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. It's free.
There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer.
Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more.
You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership.
And it is everything you need to make a podcast in one place.
Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.